But as citizens, as individuals, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves about where our data goes, how it is stored, who has access to it, what can become of it, how it can be distorted and used, if it can be distorted and used against us. Hi guys! Oh my god, time flies, doesn't it? Here we are with another video on another awesome topic, which I think is extremely crucial to talk about as well. It's all about surveillance, alright? The book, I know it's no longer a surprise, it's right down there, you know exactly what we're going to be talking about, who we're going to be talking about. I'm not too concerned about the person of Snowden himself, but more about his ideas and more about the concept of surveillance and why we should be concerned. So, let's get right on with it. Before we do, so Edward Snowden, for those of you who don't know, is a whistleblower. And he was shooed off of American soil for leaking kind of very private and very classified NSA documents, and he ended up in Russia. He was in quarantine way before quarantine was cool, essentially. Now, if you're an expert in data surveillance, you might be wondering, oh gosh, this is all old news. I know all this, I know about the protocols, I know VPN and detour and all of that, and this is what I do. I'm very concerned about my data privacy. More power to you. I'm proud of you. This is awesome. I still think if you pick up the book, you will have a lot of exceptionally amazing, refreshing points of view. Even those that do not necessarily pertain to the domain of IT or software. On the more sort of humane side, on the moral, ethical side, I think this book does a fantastic job of breaking these things down in a way that, again, like I said, whether you're an expert, whether you're not an expert, it hits home. Just a month after the Twin Towers came crumbling down to everybody's horror and disbelief, the Bush administration went on to pass something called the Patriot Act. Now, this act gave free rein to the government to collect all kinds of data, people's telephone numbers, address, their bank records, where they stayed, what they did, their health information, all of that sweet jazz, which was also known as once metadata, and they could all combine that and kind of get information about a person. So essentially, your metadata is betraying valuable information about you, what you do, tracing your movements, where you are, whom you talk to, who are the people that are in your communication network. All of this counts towards your metadata that gives information about you. If your digital footprint is with someone, they have ultimate power over you. So all this can be used against you, to profile you, to put you in whatever light a particular government intelligence agency sees fit, because that is the kind of impact your metadata can have. So the Patriot Act. Honestly, it's kind of a very ironical name for an act that goes on to devalue human privacy, which is supposed to be the very essence of patriotism, or which should be freely, readily, unquestionably available to all the citizens in a country that claims to build upon the principles of freedom and giving freedom on to the rest of the world. Patriot Act violated all of those institutions.
What this document revealed is that the NSA surveillance system is not directed at very bad people or about terrorists. It's directed at the American citizenry and other citizenries around the world indiscriminately in bulk.
Just to give you a kind of a glimpse into what it was, there were particular programs as part of the Patriot Act that allowed people to search other people up as if you were actually doing a Google search. And that would bring up a list of all of your records, like I said, all of this personal information, even whom you've been in touch with, what are the people in your communication pool, where you've been, where you're going to go, and stuff like that. All of this, there were people watching, sort of surveilling their own citizens. And all of this happened after 9/11 in this government effort, apparent effort to try and contain the aftermath of 9/11. And there was another surveillance program, and it was codenamed PRISM, that allowed the US government to glean data out of a variety of telecommunication companies such as AT&T and Verizon, this was in the US, as well as major conglomerates like Google, Amazon, what have you, Facebook, yeah? We kind of know the controversy. So these are just, by the way, scratching the surface of the US government surveillance capability. Now, you can think that, well, that's kind of what intelligence agencies do. They collect intelligence on people whom they consider to be suspects, let's say. Yeah, but there is so much more to this. And it may seem like they are harmlessly collecting information and they're just doing their job, they're going about being an intelligence agency, which is what information collection and gathering is all about. But in doing so, there were a lot of uninformed people in there that had no idea that their privacy was being grossly violated. So, like I said, things were looking bad before. They were a little shady. They were extremely shady. The government had unquestionable control over all of its citizens' data. And what happened then? So in 2015, we had this astonishing historic court case between the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, and Clapper, which was then head of intelligence. ACLU won the case. A 2014 article published in the New York Times, which, if I'm doing this right, should be on our left as we speak right now, basically highlighted that because of growing international distrust, American companies were losing tens of billions of dollars. By 2016, if you've noticed, we had the S at the end of HTTP, at the end of the protocol, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is now secured. So encryption in this day and age has become omnipotent and it is an absolute necessity. What it does is it kind of scrambles up our data using algorithms, mathematical algorithms, and then it does that in such a way that if anybody tried to intercept the data in the process of its transfer, that they would just get a bunch of gibberish and it would not make sense to them because they would not be able to decrypt it. So this is a method of purposely distorting the data, and there are several different encryption techniques in order to accomplish this end. Apple iOS, for instance, uses the 256-bit AES, which is the Advanced Encryption Standard, which would essentially take tens of billions of years to decrypt. Again, the sole intention, data privacy and to prevent snooping around from unwanted sources. Alright, so HTTPS, a little bit behind the scenes, it uses the TLS, or Transport Layer Security Protocol, in order to securely encrypt messages sent between client and server. So this is kind of like a handshake protocol, it is called. This is in order to avoid any third-party eavesdropping or interception of any sort in the process of data transfer between party A and party B. So once the client has verified the server's digital certificate, it sends an encrypted secret key over to the server then acknowledges the key, so then the server responds with a finished message, and that completes the handshake. That is sort of the HTTP in a nutshell, S. Now you might wonder, well, the US government did some shady things in the past, how does that concern me? Think about the way that we are dealing with our communication exchange, our information transfer right now. We're working with fiber optics. We have these cables that are spread undersea across vast networks, and all of this global information sort of pouring through these fibers. How do you deal with any breach of privacy that occurs when that is happening? When there are governments out there that are willing to manipulate that information and they don't take into consideration the security or safety of their individuals, of their citizens' information, how do you go around working with that? That is the big question of the day. It concerns all of us. It just doesn't concern people who lived in the USA post 9/11. It is very much a recurrent thing that we have to all be mindful of. Really, the idea is, well, what can happen even if we know of this, right? Governments are going to do government things. That is all fine and good. But as citizens, as individuals, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves about where our data goes, how it is stored, who has access to it, what can become of it, how it can be distorted and used, if it can be distorted and used against us. We have to be aware of it. This is an individual responsibility that we all have. If not to the rest of the world, then we owe it to ourselves. What happened? What changed from those days of post 9/11, where people were so heavily monitored and surveillance was at its peak, to a time like this now, where I guess not extensively, but definitely there is a lot of concern about data privacy and security and encryption. What changed down the line? Enter Edward Snowden. Which brings me finally to this exceptional book that I have the immense pleasure of discussing with you today. Snowden wrote it in the September of 2019, and I truly think it should get all the publicity that it's rightly deserving of. I laughed with it, I frowned with it, I developed a deep respect and admiration for Snowden on reading the book. Now it's entirely up to you. You can decide whether he's a villain or a hero, because he's been considered in so many different lights in the past years since this whole drama started unfolding. And I leave that decision up to you. What I want to do right now, like I said, is focus less on the individual or the person of Edward Snowden itself and more on the issue of data privacy, because this is still a very impending, imminent issue that we have out there. We live in a world where someone who raises their voice against injustices is banished and sent into exile. That's really twisted. But what can we do about it? And that's a good question. You know, I was having this conversation with a neighbor of mine, and they said the exact same thing. They were like, how many people are even aware of this? What is the point of this? Because it leads nowhere. And this is the point of it. Talk about it. Let more people know. Be aware of it. Demand your rights to privacy. Be more cautious about privacy. I know that there are a lot of people out there, me included, and a lot of times we don't care because it can get so overwhelmingly exhausted. We go to a variety of websites. It is very difficult to ensure that our privacy is well protected through all the various forums and platforms that we go on the internet, even in the span of a day or a few hours. It's hard to keep a track consistently of our privacy, whether or not it's being respected. And I totally get that. And at some points in time, we are just going to give in to the system. Facebook, for instance, what with its selling user information to major companies, conglomerates, what have you, people just, initially there was a lot of backlash, there was a lot of bitterness. It lost some of its potential clients, but then what happened? People resumed their Facebook usage. It's not possible to continuously keep up with all of that in terms of your data privacy. It's exhausting. That being said, it's at least good to be aware. On the right kinds of websites, the ones that are HTTPS secured. Use VPNs, virtual private networks, if you completely want to make sure that your data is not being overlooked. But even better, do yourself one better. Use onion routing. Shout out to a really good old friend of mine from Texas A&M who introduced me to this concept of detour. We should have the ability to mask our movements on the internet, because there are governments out there in the rest of the world in this day and age that have not proven themselves worthy of our trust. And I don't blame governments for that. I think that is such an inherently government thing to do. They want to keep tabs on what people are up to, if at least not in their country. Well, actually more so in their country, but also in what's happening in the rest of the world, because this is where foreign affairs, foreign policy kicks in. And that is going to happen. That is going to escalate, like I said, with the huge amounts of data that we're faced with today. Each and every single one of us generates this incredibly large quantities of data on a day-to-day basis. Where is all of that going? And that kind of ties in to the title of the book. It's called Permanent Records, because Edward Snowden said that the government keeps a permanent record of each and every single thing that you're doing. You bat an eye, the government knows, right? This was at least back in those times, right? We know we're talking about post 9/11. At least back in those times, it was very strict and severe, but then it continued. It continued for foreseeable future, before sort of there were court cases, before there were whistleblowers, before there was strong, independent journalists that stood up for the right causes, before there was investigative journalism. These things were really dark. These things were really messy before certain people who had the courage to talk about it did talk about it and did the right thing. So now it is up to us to continue to spread this awareness. That is the big takeaway of the book, and it's threaded around Snowden's life and his life events and his experiences and what made him the person that he was and what imparted him this ethical and moral outlook. So there you have it. That is the book of the week. I hope you like it. I know I did. I'm going to give this book a 9 out of 10. I think it was fantastic.